Hello and welcome back to this course. We are still on our function series in this our Python programming course. And in this video, we are going to be looking at how to use global and local variables. So without further ado, let's get started. So for now, I'm going to comment out this our existing function and I'm going to create a new one. But before I do that, I'm going to create two variables and I'm going to set them to x and y. So I'm going to set x to be 20 and I'm going to set y to be 10. Then I'm going to define a function. I'm going to call it multiply and I'm going to pass in two parameters x and y. And then I'm going to close this function header. And inside the function body, I'm going to just create another variable and I'm going to call it result. And I'm going to set it to, well, the product of x and y. So I'm going to say x multiplied by y and then I'm going to print result. Now, like we all know, if you want to use your function, you are going to pass in the data that you want to use inside that function. Okay, so for instance, if I want to run this function here, if I run this function, nothing will happen, right? So the only way this function is going to be effective with that x and y there is that I'm going to call the function multiply and I'm going to pass in, well, the existing x and y. Okay, so if I run this, so we can see that 20 times 10 is 200. Now I'm going to clear all of this and I'm going to pass in a different figure here, maybe 5 and 2. So our x here becomes 5 and then our y becomes 2. So I'm going to run this again and here we have 10. Now outside of this function, I'm going to print x and y. Remember, we have passed in the values of x and y here to be 5 and 2. So I am also going to print x and y inside this place. So I'm going to print x and y. And out here, I'm also going to print x and y. So now I'm going to comment out this result and I'm going to print. So the first x and y came out, that is the print statement from this multiply. It came out to be 5 and 2. And then the second print statement came out to be 20 and 10. Now, at this point, I would want us to look at what we call the namespace assignment in Python. So how does Python assign names to its variables or to everything that is passed into a file? Now, we can see that this x here and this y here, they are at the root of the file, right? They are on the program level. But then the x and y that we have here, they are at the function level. So this root of the file where I declared this x and y, we call it the global namespace. Now, this global namespace means that every other, even if I define another function here and call it add, so I define another function and I call it addition. So and I pass in another parameter, maybe a and b, and I print a and b. And at the point of calling this function, I pass in this x and y. So I say addition and I pass in x and y. This addition function will also have access to that our x and y, right? So because this x and y, this function and this other function, they are on the same level, right? But assuming I create another variable here, x and y. So maybe I say that x is equals maybe 5 and y at this point becomes 2, and then I call becomes 2. And I call this function here multiply without passing in anything. Well, Python is going to simply multiply the value of x and y, so from within, right? So this x and y inside this function will automatically overwrite the x and y that was declared outside of the function. So the variables that you declared inside your function are called the local variables, and the variables that are declared on the global namespace are called the global variable. So I'm going to remove these two arguments, these two parameters, because we already have what we are using to carry out this multiplication here. So I'm going to run it, and again we have our x and y neatly printed for us. Okay, so I'm going to clear all of this. Now, if by any chance you come outside of this function, and because we have a result variable inside this function, right? So I'm going to clear this. I'm going to change this print statement from print x and y to print result. Now, as you can see, Python is already giving us a hint that result is not found. But then we have a variable here called result, just like we have a variable here called x and y. So this is happening because this result variable is only accessible to this function where it was defined. Anything outside of this function has nothing to do with this result variable. So there's no point running this code because already we can see that we have an error. Okay, so now a global variable is simply a variable that is declared on the global namespace. So when it is declared on the global namespace, it is accessible to all the program, to the entire program, not just to one function, or as we will see in our subsequent videos, to a class. It is used by the entire program. So any function, any if statement, any program you're writing will have full access to that particular variable. But the variables that you declare inside the function is only used can only be used by that function, and that type of function is called a local variable. Now, so if for instance I want this global variable to be accessible to the global namespace, that is I want the entire program to have access to it, what I can do is that on top of this result, before I declare this result variable, I will write a statement and assign this result variable to a global space. And how can we achieve that? We can achieve that by writing this simple command, global results, right? So with this, we have made this result variable here a global variable. And if we come here now and print results, as you can see, Python now has access to this particular result variable. Okay, so now if we save this and run, well, we have everything going on perfectly fine. So inside here we have the results printed, and outside here we also have the results printed. So I hope this makes sense to you and that this does not confuse you. So we have the global namespace and the local namespace, and the variables that you declare outside of a function that is at the root of the program is accessible to all of the program is called a global variable. But the variables that you declare within a function, they are called the local variable. And the local variables can be converted to global variable by calling the global keyword on the name of the variable. So thank you so much for watching this video, and in our next video we are going to be talking about return statements. So see you in the next video.